Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 26th of January. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Japan stands by its policy of not giving in to terrorist demands after a video showed one of two Japanese captives held by Islamic State have been killed. Tokyo says it's doing all it can to save the remaining hostage. North Korea threatens South Korea with unspecified severe consequences if it continues to challenge what Pyongyang says are its attempts to improve inter-Korean relations. Plus, exit polls put the anti-austerity Syriza party on course for a clear victory in a tightly fought general election in Greece. We begin with Japan's reaction to the execution of one of its nationals by the extremist group Islamic State. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called the murder outrageous and has once again demanded the group release Kenji Goto, a second Japanese man they are holding. Abe confirmed to Japanese broadcaster NHK that the video released over the weekend that shows the decapitated body of Hirana Yukawa was authentic. The Japanese leader says saving Kenji Goto's life is now Tokyo's top priority, but Abe stressed that Japan would not give in to terrorism. In the latest recording, Mr. Goto reads a statement saying Islamic State were now demanding the release of a prisoner, a woman prisoner in fact, held in Jordan instead of their previous ransom demand. Now, South Korea may have gotten an answer to its proposal for inter-Korean talks, now almost a month old, the proposal that is. North Korea, on Sunday, warned Seoul that it would take severe consequences if it keeps challenging Pyongyang on its approach to improving inter-Korean relations. Park Ji-won reports.
North Korea is sending more mixed messages. The National Defense Commission on Sunday warned the South Korean government not to distort or criticize Pyongyang for its approach towards improved inter-Korean relations. It added South Korea could face severe consequences if it continues to challenge North Korea's forward-looking approach, which it said is aimed at strengthening ethnic ties in inter-Korean relations. Pyongyang also criticized the South for allowing civic groups to send anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border and going ahead with an annual joint military exercise with the U.S. this spring. Pyongyang also characterized Seoul's proposals for dialogue and reunions for war-separate families as rhetoric lacking in sincerity. However, up until Saturday, North Korea's state-run Rodong Sinmun newspaper has emphasized inter-Korean dialogue and negotiations. Earlier this week, the North has said, as this year marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule, the two Koreas have a duty to use it as an opportunity to boost their relations. Regarding the North's hot and cold approach, experts say Pyongyang is hoping to press Seoul to change its North Korea policies. They add the confrontation will continue until the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises set for March. Responding to the criticism on Sunday, South Korea's Unification Ministry called the North's latest threat highly regrettable and urged Pyongyang to accept Seoul's proposal for inter-Korean talks, now almost a month old. And according to reports by Seoul-based Yonhap News on Sunday, South Korean government officials had hopes of resuming inter-Korean dialogue sometime this month. But with the latest threat from the North, they now think the possibility of talks is slim. If the talks don't happen this month, it may be almost impossible for the two Koreas to organize reunions for war-separate families during Lunar New Year's holidays in mid-February. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
A new report out of Washington has found that South Korea's efforts to improve relations with North Korea would be hampered if the United States redesignates the regime as a state sponsor of terrorism. The U.S. Congressional Research Service says a hawkish response to North Korea's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures could end up doing more harm than good. It suggests the State Department soften its tone on the matter. The Research Institute adds Pyongyang would accuse the Obama administration of shutting down any chance for dialogue. The US has blamed North Korea for the hacking of Sony Pictures late last year, but Pyongyang denies having anything to do with it. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may make his debut on the international diplomatic stage much sooner than expected, South Korean government sources say. Kim could attend an international meeting called the Bandung Conference in Indonesia in April. The Indonesian government is expected to invite both Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Park Geun-hye to this event. The North's founding leader Kim Il-sung and late leader Kim Jong-il both attended the conference for its 10th anniversary in 1965. The young Kim Jong-un, could do the same, according to the South's government sources, as he has a history of doing what his father and grandfather did in the past. This follows the news that the North Korean leader will visit Russia in May for an event marking the 70th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. President Park Geun-hye is meeting with her senior presidential aides this morning, including her newly appointed special advisors. The president is expected to ask the officials to take the lead in rolling out her administration's 3-year economic innovation plan and structural reforms in the public, labour, financial and educational sectors. In particular, President Park will call on her 4 special advisors, all of which are honorary positions, to make sure that they contribute to state affairs and in strengthening communication with the public. And following her nomination of Lee Wang-gu as the new Prime Minister last week, President Park is widely expected to continue on with her cabinet reshuffle as early as this Monday. Now, a dispute over an old relic is straining cultural exchanges between Korea and Japan, with many events celebrating the 50th anniversary of their bilateral ties being cancelled in actual fact. Some are beginning to wonder about the lasting effect this is going to have on their bilateral relationship. Shin Se-min reports.
This statue of Buddha was made in Korea in the 1330s. Now it's at the center of a debate that may have strained the only well-established channel for exchange between Korea and Japan: culture. At some point, the statue ended up in Japan before it was found again in Korea and held by the Korean Customs Service. During a trilateral cultural exchange late last November, Japanese Culture Minister urged his Korean counterpart to return the statue, claiming it belonged to Japan.
Japan is accusing us of immoral insensitivity, but they're the ones who took the artifact in the first place.
Shaky relations between the neighboring countries have also forced a closure of other events, including the Korea-Japan picture exhibition, which was scheduled for this October at the National Museum of Korea. But when the Japanese government downsized the scale of the exhibition, Korea decided to cancel. The Korean Museum will now host a Korea-Japan culinary exchange exhibition instead. That's not all. The lingering animosity has affected other fields as well. The Academy of Korean Studies decided to scrap a plan to hold a symposium aimed at improving diplomatic relations between the two countries. And the Northeast Asian History Foundation decided to change an exhibition on diplomatic ties into an event commemorating the 70th anniversary of the nation's independence in August. Performing arts events are also shifting away from Korea-Japan related historical themes. Observers worry that this sequence of events, if allowed to continue, could further strain ties between the two neighboring countries. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Right, well, we're going to take a look at the Greek elections in just a moment. But before then, we're going to take a look through the other global headlines we're following this Monday, with Eunice Kim standing by as always for us at the News Centre. Eunice, a remarkable show of friendship and symbolism in India, and that's where US President Barack Obama is on this Monday. And between the two leaders, there's already been some progress on what is just the first day of Obama's 3-day trip there.
You're right, Mark. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi even broke protocol when he welcomed President Obama with a handshake and a bear hug yesterday. And after hours of discussions, the two leaders are said to have renewed a 10-year defense pact and pledged to work to cut greenhouse gas emissions. But perhaps the most noteworthy was progress on a civilian nuclear power cooperation.
Today we achieved a breakthrough understanding on two issues that were holding up our ability to advance our civil nuclear cooperation, and we're committed to moving towards full implementation. And this is an important step that shows how we can work together to elevate our relationship.
The two countries announced they would clear past disagreements that would unlock billions of dollars in nuclear trade and allow American companies to supply India with civilian nuclear technology. The two issues that had kept a landmark 2008 nuclear deal at a standstill were issues of liability in case of a nuclear accident and tracking the American nuclear fuel. Now, both sides did agree on a large insurance pool to be set up to address those concerns. Mr. Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama will be the guests of honor in today's India's Republic Day festivities. The two leaders also declared an era of new trust, painting a very different picture from years ago when Modi was under fire for his alleged connection to anti-Muslim riots in the Gujarat district where he was chief minister in 2002.
Yeah, a very cordial relationship between those two leaders. But turning now to a very different picture in Egypt, an anniversary, in fact, of pro-democracy uprising that actually saw more protests in Egypt, and these ones also turned deadly.
Right. You may remember, Mark, back in 2011, activists in Egypt came in masses to protest the 3-decade-long rule of Hosni Mubarak against poverty and government corruption, ultimately toppling him. But 4 years later, that struggle appears to be continuing as political dissent continues to see strong resistance in Egypt, which, of course, had also seen its elected leader, Mohamed Morsi, unseated back in 2013. Protests turned violent in the wake of news that a well-known labor rights activist, a poet and a mother, was shot dead in a Saturday march in Cairo. Officials say at least 16 people are dead, including police officers, when protesters violently clashed with police. Authorities have opened an investigation into the death of that poet activist, as her death has renewed criticism of police force.
Okay, Eunice, thank you very much for keeping us updated on all the global headlines, and we'll see you back at noon.
See you then.
Now, for this week's Industry Insight, we're going to take a look at the local beer industry, and more specifically, the rising popularity of imported beers. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Many Koreans love a nice cold beer or two after a long day or week in the office. Their choice used to be limited to mostly Korean beer. But now, you can easily find beers from all four corners of the world, even in a regular grocery store, like this. Just a few years ago, it wasn't all that common to see imported beers on store shelves in Korea. But in recent years, imports have been swelling. Foreign brands like Asahi, Heineken, and Guinness, to name but a few, are stacked high and wide. The imported beer trend started to take off in Korea in the mid-2000s and has been intensifying ever since. Top dog at the moment is Asahi. The Japanese beer has been #1 in imported beer market in Korea for the last 4 years and continues to widen its base of loyal customers in Korea with its crisp and refreshing taste.
We wanted to differentiate the taste of our beer from our competitors, and I believe that has been appreciated by our customers. We expect sales to keep growing.
Last year, Asahi imported over 26,000 tons of beer into Korea, triple the amount it imported in 2010. Overall, beer imports to Korea topped $100 million in 2014, jumping 24% from the previous year. Korea exported around $73 million of beer, leaving the country with a deficit of almost $38.5 million last year. So why are Koreans increasingly choosing imported brands over old local favorites like Obi, Cass, and Haidt?
Korean consumers are going from high alcoholic content beverages to low, so beer sales are increasing across the board. Tastes have broadened too, as more people travel and study abroad, so they become fond of the beers they tried overseas.
Feeling the heat, Korean breweries have been rolling out fresh brands that are quite the departure from their original beers.
In the case of Obi, it released 2 different brands last year and upgraded its premium Obi beer to give it a deeper taste. Local beer companies are also developing new flavors to adapt to the changing tastes of the Korean consumer.
Given the surging number of domestic and foreign brands in Korea, Korean beer makers are looking overseas to make up for their weakening sales at home. Korean breweries exported $4.5 million of beer to Iraq last year, becoming the Middle Eastern country's 3rd largest supplier. Haidt Jinlo, which began exporting to Vietnam in 1966, now ships to some 60 countries. And OB is expanding its overseas markets, including Mongolia, Hong Kong, and Australia. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
The Syriza party has claimed a stunning victory in Greece's general elections. The left-wing party may even have enough seats to govern on its own. Some analysts are calling the win a political earthquake for Europe, as the party wants to renegotiate the terms of its EU bailout and wants Greece out of the Eurozone. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Greece's anti-austerity Syriza party swept to a convincing victory in Sunday's snap elections, throwing the country's future in the Eurozone into question. However, it remains unclear whether the party has won enough seats to govern on its own, or whether it will have to seek support from other parties. That might not be clear until Monday evening local time, or even later, depending on when all the votes are counted. Outgoing Prime Minister Antonis Samaras conceded a matter of hours after exit polls showed an overwhelming win for Syriza.
The Greek people have spoken and we all respect their decision. My conscience is clear. I took over a country on the edge of catastrophe. I had to handle hot coals. Most people said we wouldn't make it, but we did, and we avoided the worst.
Samaras says austerity measures has set the foundation to pull Greece out of its fiscal crisis. But Syriza's win is expected to signal Greece leaving the Eurozone, dropping the euro, and will set up a showdown with Greece's international creditors. Party leader Alexis Tsipra's main campaign pledge was to undo many of the reforms the outgoing government carried out to keep Greece afloat.
Greek people will regain social cohesion and dignity. And the message is that our common future in Europe is not the future of austerity. It's the future of democracy, solidarity and cooperation.
Greece's debt topped $369 billion last year. Its unemployment rate stands at 26%, and a third of the population live under the poverty line. Syriza needs to win a majority of the 300 parliamentary seats to form a government on its own. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now back here in Korea, and public anger over a new policy that raises income tax rates has drawn a response from the government. The government says it has been in discussions with the ruling party on ways to amend the tax code, including plans to expand tax rebates for multiple child and single-person households, new tax credits to encourage people to have kids, and a hike in tax credits for pension investments. The government is also seeking to boost the tax credits for education and medical spending. Meanwhile, the Korea Taxpayers Association has launched a petition to campaign against the proposed changes to the new tax policy. Korea is expected to fall short of its tax revenue target again this year. Chinese authorities have implemented a measure that requires the country's video streaming websites to get licenses to show foreign films and TV series. Now, Korean dramas, which have become immensely popular in China, thanks in large part to these sites, are expected to suffer as a result. Our Son Jong-in reports.
This is one of the many Korean dramas that have been a huge success in China. Chinese viewers were able to watch them almost immediately after their release in Korea, but it could be a different story 2 months from now. According to a new regulation from China's media watchdog, video streaming sites will need to get publication licenses for imported films and TV series from the end of March. The regulation aims to filter out TV shows with satirical, cruel, or lewd elements, but even if they are approved, it will take at least 6 months to get the license.
All foreign dramas or movies should be registered by March 31st in order to be broadcast on video streaming sites.
Video streaming websites have been a staple provider of Korean TV dramas for Chinese fans, as they can be watched on PCs or mobile devices. Korean dramas that gained popularity through streaming services are expected to be hit the hardest. And even if they do get licensed, they'll come out at least 6 months late, prompting Korean entertainment companies to come up with a new marketing strategy. Experts here warn that illegal distribution will surge after the regulation takes effect, becoming a major threat to copyright. Several new American TV series have already been removed from Chinese video streaming sites due to their provocative contents. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with our 2015 Asian Cup coverage as the Korean national football team finds themselves one win away from heading over to the Asian Cup final. But before they can get there, Iraq looks to stop them. And just by looking at the numbers, the 69th ranked Korea has a better head-to-head record over the 114th ranked Iraq with 6 wins, 10 draws, and 2 losses. But fatigue an issue for both nations as Korea played 120 minutes in the quarterfinals while Iraq played 120 minutes plus the penalty shootout against Iran on Friday. But with Son Heung-min finally finding his scoring touch against Uzbekistan, he looks to continue that against Iraq as Korea gets closer to winning their first Asian Cup title in 55 years. Now, one of the most entertaining All-Star games of all the domestic leagues in Korea is the V-League All-Star Game. And with the reopening of the Changchung Gymnasium in Central Seoul, the fans, well, they enjoyed every bit of the 2015 V-League All-Star Game on Sunday. Now, with the women's All-Stars playing the first 2 sets and the men's All-Stars playing the final 2 sets, it was quite an exciting duel between the 2 teams. But despite the 2-2 set score at the end of the day, the V-Stars outscored the K-Stars 54-50, with KEPCO's Chung Kwang-in and Hyundai Hillstate's Polina Raimanova winning the MVP honors after scoring the most points with 9 and 8 points, respectively. C+, a grade I'm actually used to seeing oh so much during my university days, but Kang Jong-ho getting a C+? Well, now with SB Nation minor league ball's John Sickles ranking the top 20 Pirates prospects, the newly acquired Kang Jong-ho was ranked 11th and given an average grade of C+. And in the article, Sickles talks about him being a dangerous hitter in Korea, but questions how that'll translate in the majors. While grading him at this point seems to be a wild guess, there's still questions on which infield position best fits him, as general manager Neil Huntington looks to try him out in different spots during spring training. Now, for many short track fans in the nation, it might have been weird seeing An Hyun-soo, aka Victor An, represent Russia during the 2014 Sochi Winter Games. And while those fans were used to watching him dominate in the Asian Championships, he's now dominating in the European Championships. With the European Short Track Championship taking place in the Netherlands, Russia's Victor An continues his dominance, this time in the 500-meter event, coming in at a final time of 41.78 seconds for a first-place finish. Now, last year, the former Korean short track star won the overall gold during the 2014 European Short Track Championship. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Rain has let up, but the thick fog is cutting down the visibility to less than 1 kilometer here in Seoul. So it looks pretty hazy and cloudy out there. So if you plan to hit the road soon, drive with extra caution. The roads are still wet as well. But as many of us have noticed, the temperatures kicked off pretty mild, and readings will be a lot milder than seasonal averages, peaking at 8 here in Seoul. And the regions down south will see temperatures hovering over 10 degrees Celsius, as the daytime high in Daegu and Gwangju will peak at over, 11 and 12 respectively, and Busan will top out at 15 later on. And as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will rise to 11 and Daejeon and Dokdo will be topping out at 9. Now today should actually be the mildest day of the week. Temperatures will decrease as the day or week goes on, and Gangwon-do provinces will receive mix of rain and snow throughout the week. So beware of weather fluctuations this week and take good care of yourself. That's all for the weather. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jeon, for the weather. And that's all we have for now. We'll be back again at noon Korea time with our next newscast. Until then, goodbye.